Hey there, Teresa here. Really shaking things up, stirring things up in terms of how you, how we think about and do money in our world. And this morning, when I was checking in, like, what are we going to talk about today? I heard those shocking words that shook me up. The American dream has cancer. Now, here's what I mean by it. Um, Cancer invades an otherwise healthy body and begins to turn against the body, and then cancer metastasizes and spreads and starts to take over more and more of the body, killing the healthy cells, and ultimately, unfortunately, far too many people. So the American dream in its original form was really healthy. It was about people being able to provide a life of meaning and fulfillment for their families. It was about people being able to grow and create a better world, a better life for themselves and their families. It was about, like, my ancestors leaving Ireland in the midst of the potato famine, where people were dying and starving of hunger, and having this dream of being able to come to America where they could flourish. That's the healthy American dream. So, what do I mean when American dream has cancer? Well, it took me back to one of the most powerful, spontaneous demonstrations I've ever done, and the immediate insight and download I got in the process. It was at a retreat I did before COVID called Surrender to Abundance. And there were women at that retreat who were on the full spectrum of experiencing scarcity around money. There were people who were drowning in debt, barely making ends meet, not making ends meet. And there were some women who were financially prosperous. They had, one, if not two, were actual millionaires. And yet, the scarcity that those who were well off financially were experiencing ranged from, like, feeling afraid to spend and enjoy their money lest they run out, like they not have enough in the future. But the deeper scarcity that they experienced was their guilt. They felt so guilty because they were doing so well. They had so much, and all around them, people had so little. And that was all brought up in this retreat, where they heard the stories of women who were, like, just not making it. And so the question arose, and so these women, they really wanted to help, they wanted to support, they have big hearts, they wanted to give. And yet they had a history of sometimes giving at their own expense. And so the question bobbled up, and they asked me my opinion, my insight on, like, how do you navigate this? That you can enjoy your own financial success and prosperity and not feel guilty, and yet help others without having it be at your own expense. And so I grabbed some props really spontaneously. If I were really sophisticated with videos, I'd be able to demonstrate it with you here, but you're going to have to use your imagination. So one prop I grabbed was a carafe, like a water goblet, a wine carafe that hotels, restaurants, etc. uses. We're going to say this glass is that carafe. And then I grabbed a pitcher full of water. Now, I also had a big bus head to catch any water I spilled. So duly noted, I didn't pour all over the carpet. And what I started to do to demonstrate what sometimes happens is I'd start to pour the water into the carafe, meaning a person and their lives. And as soon as water got in the carafe, I kept spilling it out. So I'm pouring it in and it's almost immediately spilling out. And that spilling out was like what some of the women experienced, like what they did with their guilt. As soon as they had money, they were like letting it go, giving it away so that then they didn't feel guilty because they had so much money. And as I kept pouring in and kept spilling out, the glass got slipperier and slipperier and slipperier, and finally it fell out of my hands. I said, that's not going to help anybody. That's not how you help people. That's how, in some respects, like literally, you can make a mess of, of your own life and for others. I said, here's what I think is the abundant way to respond when you're or we're in a financially prosperous place, and yet there's so many who aren't and we want to help. So I emptied well, there wasn't much in the carafe, but I made sure it was empty, and I had another pitcher of water. And I started pouring it, and I held the carafe steady, and I just kept pouring. And the water started to fill it and fill it and fill it, and I kept pouring. And suddenly the carafe was filled, and the water started pouring out, overflowing from the carafe. I said, this is the and of abundance, that we allow ourselves to be fully filled and provided for and supported. And when we recognize sufficiency, when we recognize fulfillment, we can still open ourselves to receive even more, but that more gets to become part of the overflow that creates more for others. And then came that bombshell of a divine download. I said, what happens, however, in the archetype of scarcity, where we're wearing not enough glasses and we don't recognize sufficiency and we just think more is always better, is when we reach that point where the water's been filled and filled and filled and filled, and right when it's going to start to overflow, there are parts of us that want to get a bigger carafe and keep pouring it all in so we can have more. The problem is that when you go from this being filled to this, it's only going to have this much, and now you're in a perpetual state of not enough again. And so you keep thinking, I need more, and we never get to the point of sufficiency so that we can exhale and give and share generously, not at our own expense, but to contribute to the flow of abundance for all. The cancer that I refer to that has taken over the healthy impulse of what we call the American dream is that default reaction, because we're in this archetype of scarcity I talk about all the time, is that when we hit a goal or when we've gotten filled, we immediately want a bigger container, want a bigger container, want a bigger container. And then it becomes a bigger container and a bigger container, and you start to see what's happening in our world, where there's the income gap between those who are exorbitantly wealthy and those who are living in poverty, food insecurity, one paycheck away from disaster. You see it widening. You see, cancer on the American dream doesn't just affect individuals. It affects us all. And the monumental money shift that I'm all about, that I'm committed to, is we're going for a cure for this cancer. And the cure for that cancer is a monumental money shift out of living our lives and the way we do money, rooted in, built on this operating system, this subconscious archetype of scarcity, and installing a new operating system, what I call the divine archetype of abundance, that allows us to be filled with all that we need for life and the fullest expression of who we are, and allows us to be vessels of overflow, contributing to the abundance of all, receiving life-giving resources that we need, and being part of the ongoing availability of life-giving resources for all. If you want to know more about this monumental money shift, if you want to join me on this mission for curing the cancer that's taken over the American dream, then please register today and reserve your spot for my upcoming webinar. I call it the Monumental Money Shift. I'm on a mission. Will you join me?